A man was ordered off a landing craft first, not because he was brave, but because he was tall enough to measure how deep the water was. A rodeo clown had 17 broken bones on one side of his body alone. A future Oscar winner walked out of a burning bomber with his face destroyed, then rebuilt himself into one of cinema's most feared villains. These weren't stunts. These weren't scripts. These were the real lives of the men who later strapped on holsters and rode into frame for the cameras, and compared to what they'd already survived, Hollywood was the easy part. 10 men. 10 stories of war, blood, poverty, and reinvention. And one of them did something so singular that in over 100 years, not a single other human being has managed to repeat it. Let's start with the man they used as a human yardstick against enemy gunfire. January 22, 1944. Anzio Beach, Italy. A 20-year-old private stands crammed into a landing craft with the 3rd Infantry Division, and the only thing anyone knows about him is his height, 6'7". That single fact decides his fate. Command orders him off the boat first, not for courage, but because his long legs make him the most efficient way to gauge how deep the water is before the rest of the men jump. He wades into the Mediterranean under gunfire, water lapping at his waist, and waves his unit forward. 10 days later, his luck runs out. German machine gun fire tears through his leg, shattering bones so badly doctors consider amputation. Only penicillin saves it. He spends over a year in military hospitals, undergoes multiple surgeries, and walks away with a Bronze Star, a Purple Heart, and a Combat Infantryman badge, and a limp he will carry for the rest of his life. That man drops the U from his last name and becomes James Arness. For 20 years and 635 episodes, he plays Marshal Matt Dillon on Gunsmoke, the longest-running live-action primetime series in television history. Eagle-eyed fans over the decades noticed his limp seemed to worsen with each passing season. It wasn't a character choice. It was Anzio, still walking beside him 3 decades later. John Wayne himself pushed for Arness to land the role that would define him. He died in 2011 at 88, but his story of quiet, involuntary heroism is just the opening act. Because the next actor didn't survive one brutal ordeal. He survived 209 straight days of it. Everyone adored Hoss Cartwright. For 14 seasons on Bonanza, Dan Blocker played the gentle giant of the Ponderosa, the soft-hearted son, whose warmth made him the show's most beloved figure. Audiences had no idea the man behind that smile had already lived through hell. Born in Texas in 1928, reportedly a 14-pound newborn, Blocker grew into a 6 feet 4 inches, 300-pound frame with size 14.5 feet. Before Hollywood, he was a college rodeo rider, a bar bouncer, and eventually an English teacher with a master's degree. Then Korea happened. Drafted in 1950, he was thrown into the 45th Infantry Division, the legendary Thunderbirds, and landed at Incheon in time to be on the front line by Christmas. What followed was 209 consecutive days of combat across the war's deadliest ground. Pork Chop Hill, Old Baldy, Hill 223, names still spoken with a shudder by Korean War veterans. During one firefight, Blocker was shot while trying to drag a wounded comrade to safety. He refused to be evacuated and stayed at his post until his regiment was finally pulled back. He came home with a Purple Heart and a Combat Infantryman badge, and a story he almost never told. In 1959, he became Hoss. For 14 years, he gave America a gentle giant, never letting on what he'd survived on those frozen hillsides. Then on May 13, 1972, routine gallbladder surgery led to a fatal pulmonary embolism. He was only 43. Bonanza's writers killed off Hoss on screen rather than recast him, and the show itself was canceled the very next season. A war hero taken by something far smaller than any bullet that missed him overseas. But the next man's road to toughness started somewhere just as unforgiving, a burning bomber over the Arizona desert. Before he was Hollywood's most terrifying face, Jack Palance was a coal miner's son breathing the same black dust that would eventually kill his father. Born Polinick in a Pennsylvania mining town in 1919, he went underground as a teenager alongside men who counted every day above ground a small miracle. He clawed his way out with his fists, boxing professionally as Jack Brazzo, and reportedly stringing together 15 straight wins before a loss to a future heavyweight contender. "You must be nuts to get your head beaten in for $200, he'd later say. Then came the war that would remake his face and his career at once. As an Army Air Forces bomber pilot, Palance survived a horrifying 1943 crash near Tucson when his B-24 caught fire on takeoff. He suffered severe burns and head trauma, spending nearly 2 years enduring reconstructive surgeries that left him with the gaunt, angular features that would soon terrify audiences worldwide. He used the GI Bill to study at Stanford, then talked his way onto Broadway, understudying Marlon Brando in a streetcar named Desire before eventually taking over the role outright. Co-star Richard Widmark admitted Palance was the only actor who ever genuinely frightened him. His breakout came as the ice-cold gunfighter Jack Wilson in Shane, earning an Oscar nomination and cementing him as Western's most menacing villain for decades. Then in 1991, at age 73, he finally won his Oscar for City Slickers and celebrated by dropping to the stage floor and knocking out one-arm push-ups live on television. He died in 2006 at 87, a man rebuilt from fire into legend. But the next actor's path to stardom ran straight through a federal penitentiary. Most actors' origin stories involve a lucky break. Rory Calhoun's involves San Quentin. Born Francis Timothy McCown in 1922, he lost his gambler father as an infant and grew up under a stepfather who beat him regularly. By 13, he'd stolen a revolver and landed in a reformatory. He escaped, robbed jewelry stores, and stole a car across state lines. At 17, he was sentenced to 3 years in federal penitentiary in Missouri, and when that sentence ended, he was transferred straight to San Quentin on separate charges, not released until just before his 21st birthday. By the time most men his age were starting careers, Calhoun had already served time in 3 different institutions. Most who walk that road never fully walk back. He worked as a lumberjack, a miner, and a truck driver until January 1944, when he was spotted horseback riding in the Hollywood Hills by actor Alan Ladd. Ladd's wife happened to be a talent agent, and within weeks Calhoun had his first screen test. Standing 6 feet 4 inches with rugged, weathered looks, he was made for westerns. He appeared in over 80 films, including River of No Return alongside Robert Mitchum and Marilyn Monroe, and headlined the hit series The Texan. In 1955, Confidential magazine exposed his criminal record to the public, and instead of ending his career, it only deepened his outlaw mystique. He died in 1999 at 76. Calhoun proved a prison record couldn't cage a man's future. But the next entry's job meant standing directly in the path of 2,000 pounds of enraged bull on purpose, over and over again. Most people remember Slim Pickens riding a nuclear bomb to its target in Dr. Strangelove, or bumbling through Blazing Saddles. Almost nobody remembers that Lewis Burton Lindley Jr. spent nearly 2 decades doing one of the deadliest jobs in professional sports, rodeo clown and bullfighter. His entire role was placing his own body between a fallen rider and a raging bull, so the cowboy on the ground had a chance to crawl away. At major rodeos like Cheyenne Frontier Days and the Calgary Stampede, starting when he was barely a teenager. The toll was almost unbelievable. 2 broken wrists, broken collarbones, broken hands, elbows, and ribs, a crushed chest, a broken back twice, broken foot bones on 5 separate occasions. One X-ray of a single side of his body revealed 17 healed fractures. His famous name came from a joke. At 16, he quit school to chase the rodeo circuit, and his furious father swore to disown him if his real name showed up on an entry list. So a rodeo manager, looking at the scrawny kid asking for an alias, simply wrote down what the prize money would amount to: Slim Pickens. That afternoon, the newly christened Slim Pickens won $400. Director William Keithley discovered him at a rodeo in 1950 and cast him opposite Errol Flynn. From there, he rode alongside Brando, John Wayne, and Steve McQueen, and famously needed no stunt double because no professional stuntman could outride him. He died in 1983 at 64, following surgery for a brain tumor. A body held together by scar tissue and grit. But the next man's heroics weren't performed for an audience. They happened alone, inside a hunting lodge, under enemy fire. Neville Brand didn't find his way into acting through auditions. He found it through combat. Born in Iowa in 1920, he enlisted straight out of high school and fought his way through the Ardennes, the Rhineland, and Central Europe with the 83rd Infantry Division. On March 1, 1945, in Germany, his unit was pinned down by relentless machine gun fire pouring from a hunting lodge. Every man was frozen in place. Brand wasn't. In his own blunt words years later, "I must have flipped my lid. I decided to go into that lodge." Alone, through the rear entrance, he cleared out the enemy positions single-handedly, an act that earned him the Silver Star, the U.S. military's 3rd highest award for valor. Barely a month later, he was shot through the arm along the Weser River and nearly bled out. He added a Purple Heart, a Bronze Star, and a Combat Infantryman badge to his collection. Some reports called him the fourth most decorated American soldier of the war, a title Brand himself always brushed off. After the war, he studied acting on the GI Bill and became one of Hollywood's most convincing heavies, headlining the Western series Laredo and appearing across the golden age of TV Westerns. But the war followed him home in the form of severe PTSD and a devastating fight with alcohol. The booze became medicine, he admitted in a 1975 interview. Some mornings, he needed a pint of whiskey just to work up the nerve to make a phone call. He was also a devoted book collector, amassing over 30,000 volumes, one of Hollywood's largest private libraries, until a 1978 fire tore through his Malibu home and destroyed most of it. He died in 1992 at 71. A genuine hero who spent decades trying to outrun his own bravery. Next up, a Marine fighter pilot who became so fearless with his body that stuntmen refused a job he accepted without blinking. Dale Robertson never took an acting class in his life, and it showed in the best way. Everything about his screen presence was earned, not performed. Born in Oklahoma in 1923, he grew up boxing and training horses at a military academy before World War II sent him to Europe with the 32nd Combat Engineer Battalion, where he saw some of the campaign's fiercest fighting. Robertson was wounded twice and decorated with both the Bronze Star and Silver Star for gallantry, two of the highest honors the military offers. In one harrowing engagement, an explosion ripped him out of a tank hatch and killed the rest of his crew. He survived and kept fighting. True to form, he rarely spoke about it afterward. Genuine tough guys usually don't. Back home, he returned to his horses and might have stayed there if not for a photograph his mother had taken that happened to catch a talent agent's eye. Time magazine would later call him possibly the best horseman on television. He became Jim Hardy in Tales of Wells Fargo, riding his own horse and performing his own stunts for 5 seasons, then carried that same authenticity into Iron Horse and Death Valley days. Off-screen, he kept over 200 horses on his Oklahoma ranch until his death in 2013 at age 89. A quiet hero who let his actions speak louder than any script. But the next man's resume includes shattering an NBA backboard before his team had even played its first official game. Long before Chuck Connors spun a modified Winchester as Lucas McCain on The Rifleman, he was busy achieving something almost no athlete in history ever has. He played professional basketball for the Boston Celtics and professional baseball for both the Brooklyn Dodgers and Chicago Cubs. Only 13 people have ever competed in both the NBA and Major League Baseball, and Connors managed something even rarer than that combination itself. On November 5, 1946, during warm-ups before the Celtics' very first home game in franchise history, Connors shattered the backboard entirely. Glass rained onto the court, the game was delayed over an hour, and Connors became the first player in professional basketball history to break a backboard. The Celtics hadn't even tipped off their inaugural season yet, and he'd already made history for all the wrong reasons. Standing 6 feet 5 inches, Connors had served in World War II as a tank warfare instructor at Fort Campbell and West Point, and he carried that same discipline into his acting career. As Lucas McCain from 1958 to 1963, he performed every rifle spin himself, having drilled the move thousands of times until it became second nature. He went on to star opposite Gregory Peck in The Big Country, and later led the series Branded. He died of lung cancer in 1992 at 71. A two-sport pioneer who made history by accident before he ever made it on purpose. But nothing compares to the accomplishment of the man closing out this list. He's the only person in 100 years of Hollywood to pull off what he did, and no one has come remotely close since.